Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about popular languages. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, how would you advise someone who is looking to become a software engineer and is hung up on learning the language that is most popular in terms of job opportunities? I would say that you are probably me when I first started. Because I did exactly the same. I had the same thought. Like when I started out and I wanted to be a programmer, the thing I was most interested in was not necessarily the coolest language. It was, hey, I want the most universal language, the one that is like going to give me the ability to program all the things that I want to. Because in those days, of course, I didn't even know what most languages were being used for. Which is incidentally one thing to keep a track of, because everybody's going to tell you that their language can do well, depending on how much of a fanboy they are or fangirl. They will tell you that anything can be used for anything, and yeah, we can discuss that. But there are flavors, like different things are used for different programming languages are more popular for various tasks and for various roles within the industry. And that's not something I had. I suspected that when I first started out, and my goal was basically I want to do this as a living thing, so that's my first stop. And so in my region, I took a look and I saw what was being offered, and I saw that, well, it was basically all the job postings and I think that's still the case, almost all of them were for either Java or C Sharp. Those were the two main languages in my region, and I'm pretty sure it still is, with a side dish of JavaScript and TypeScript these days, but that was also the case. And that's why when people ask me, can you remake like 2024 or whatever year we are at now, can you make your version of that you made like years ago about languages to learn, I kind of go, it is gonna be the same. It's gonna be the exact same list. JavaScript with TypeScript, or those two, Java and C Sharp. And the reason why I can say that is because, at least in my region and for most of the world, these are the main corporate languages that we do web. JavaScript and TypeScript for sure if you're going to do anything in front end. There is no discussion there. You have to, basically. There is no competitor that is worth talking about. You can talk about frameworks and like different types of SPA, like libraries and stuff like that, but like in terms of languages, there's nothing that is even close to competing with it. For the backend, it is usually Java and C Sharp. But I'm also going to tell you something that is very important, and that is that just because something is globally true, that doesn't mean that it's true in your specific region, and that is extremely important to know. And it is especially important to know that when you're working with languages that may not be as quote-unquote mainstream and corporately loved as Java and C Sharp, when you might, let's say that you're doing Ruby stuff, Python stuff, or PHP stuff, or like these other sorts of languages, or Node.js for that matter. So depending on the specific setup that you're going for, it might vary a lot from region to region. Even when I'm saying C Sharp and Java, they might be very popular, as I said, at a global scale. But that doesn't mean that you're in your specific town, all the employers in your town or in your city, like that they're all using that. It might be the case that in your specific region, one or like something like really different from what I'm saying is super important in that region. So even though the total amount of jobs is higher for, say, these languages on average, in your region it might be different. And that's why I always tell people, never ever buy into the bullshit of 10 top languages to learn in whatever fucking year it is. Don't do that. Don't even listen to me when I say these things. The reason why I can say it with confidence is because I've checked the numbers, and you can go and check the numbers too if you want to. There's tons of if you don't go to those top lists, you can go to and look at just popularities in job searches. That's the thing I usually recommend to people. If you just do global searches for the different languages, you will get a rough idea of how many job postings are out currently for a given task, for a given type of stack. And I always come back with the same thing. It's basically those languages. If you look at terms of how many postings there are, and then there are of course polls you can look at that are not clickbait and stuff like that, of course, but that's the main thing. Try to use the job postings, because the thing about the job postings, although they are in no means a perfect representation of what you're going to do on the job, or a perfect representation of all the things that you need to know and what's going to be relevant and so forth, it is at the very least one of the best approximations that you can get for figuring out what's going to be a popular language in your specific region. And as I said, it's usually going to be those languages that we're talking about, at least if you're into web development and it's about just getting employment options regardless of everything else. Some companies, as I said, like usually larger corporations, not exclusively by any means, but quite a lot of larger corporations favor Java and C# for their backend development. Everybody, as I like to say to people, if you just really want to be sure that there is a company out there for you, then you do front-end development, because every single, like regardless of, as a backend developer, you might have different types of backends, but every single browser or every single front-end application is going to use JavaScript and TypeScript. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have an easy time finding a job and so forth, because as you can imagine, just because, as I said, you have the same language for all applications for one situation doesn't necessarily mean that you have more jobs. That's why I'm telling you, go and look it up. Check out like the job postings and what the requirements are and so forth. But those will be the main languages. And then, as I said, everything else is, in my opinion, there are absolutely languages that are really popular for specific situations. Like I think Python is still ranked as one of, if not the most popular language there is in terms of just adoption and popularity. But as I said, just because it's popular doesn't necessarily mean that it is popular due to job purposes. Python has basically the largest monopoly that I know of, at least of, for say AI work and machine learning and stuff like that, which is, even though it's really hot right now, in terms of job opportunities, you're still not going to beat web. And that's what I tell people, like if you want to go into anything, regardless of if the goal is to get a job, web is usually, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, the safe bet. Because every other industry, like there are job opportunities, absolutely, but in terms of just quantity of how many companies are dealing with the different areas, web is usually the biggest one. Whereas other industries and other types of application development, it absolutely does happen, but not at the same scale. So it's really up to you what you want to focus on. So what I want you to take away from this is that the tips that I usually give to software developers, if you're just in it to get a job, then bet on web first and foremost, because web is by far the biggest job provider in IT as far as I know, in terms of for us software developers. And then go into JavaScript, TypeScript, Java or C#. These are the main, the big market shares in, well, basically globally. But my number one tip is still, don't take it from me. Go and fact check. It is so easy to do this. Remember, it's a big investment to become a software developer, and if you are anything like me, you want some assurances at the very least that you're not quote-unquote wasting your time. And that's why I tell you, look in your specific region or a few places where you might feel like, yeah, that would be a cool place to work or so forth and so forth, and feel the waters. It is literally as easy as taking the browser that I'm assuming you have in front of you or somewhere else, like just go to the browser, go into any job search engine that you have in your region and search for the keywords, and then you can get a feel for roughly how many people are looking for people like you or like people with a given stack in your region. And that incidentally is also one of the best ways for you to figure out what other things apart from the programming language are going to be relevant to you, because I can tell you that learning just a programming language, that is the first step, but there's also other tools around it like cloud providers and things like that, and different types of databases depending on what you're going to do. Now in front end it's different frameworks and stuff like that that will be relevant to it. You have to start somewhere, but the job postings will almost always be the best way to fact check, like to reality check yourself and see if you're sort of on track in terms of getting job prospects, or if you're getting too far into, you know, the open source communities and all these other areas where people have a lot of ideas of what's really cool and what's really powerful to use in IT, but may not necessarily be the most relevant thing for a job purpose. Have a great day.